You don't need a stage. You need a chair and the guts to tell the truth. I don't have all the answers. I'm still sorting out my own. But I've learned that when we name something, we drag it into the light, and it doesn't own us the same way anymore. This is for anyone else who's tired of bluffing and just wants to name what's real while we build. Most weeks it's me, sometimes a guest. Always becoming, always honest. This is no stage, just a chair. Some days are hard days. And as I was preparing for recording today and doing everything that we're supposed to do to be productive and helpful and on schedule and on task, I had a really long day yesterday. It was great, really great day. I drove 2 hours, met with some clients. Also got to see some good friends that I've known for a long time. A good friend that goes back 20 years of life with them. Another friend that goes back another 15 years. They're doing amazing things in their jobs, but I was going to be in their town, so I wanted to meet with them too. And I had all of these really great, really fun conversations. I met with a client, had 2 hours of those client meetings. Those meetings went really well, like far better than I thought they were going to. Then I drove home and I listened to music and I listened to podcasts, and I got home and I got to spend time with my family. Had a really good day. And I got up today just spent. And I got up today feeling, we talked about this in a previous episode, feeling like 20% of what I really am. And I have a couple of good friends that I talk with about this, and both of them asked kind of the same question. What kind of caused this? And what do you do when it happens? And as I was driving over here to record these episodes and to have these conversations, I just felt like there's something in me that needs to say out loud that I'm not always on. That I'm not always together. And on those days that I'm not on and I'm not together, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do. In the middle of me talking about all these thoughts and theories and ideas and philosophies and tactics and strategies and all the other things, there's still the days that I just go, I don't know. And maybe it would be really beneficial to say out loud that there are days that I just don't know. And today is one of those days. Today is one of those days that I'm trying to keep doing the right stuff and trying to keep thinking the right things and trying to keep putting one foot in front of the other and trying to continue to do the right things and do the next right thing and do all the things that I talk about and philosophize about. And today I really want to just pull the covers over my head and say, see you tomorrow. And let's not pretend like there aren't those days. Let's not pretend like every day is full of vision and every day is full of inspiration and every day is full of strategy. And instead acknowledge the fact that some days are just full of putting your one foot in front of the other. Continuing to walk. Today is that day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down and I'm going to say it out loud, because I said that this was the place that I say it messy. And I said that this is the place that I will let people know that it's not tidy. So this is me trying to put my money where my mouth is. And I'm walking in with my cappuccino. And today it's rainy and overcast. And it's November. And life is busy and there's not a moment for me to push pause. So maybe my version of pause today is saying out loud that today is hard. So if you've had those days, welcome. So let's start with a story. It's actually not even really a story. We start every episode, and I've actually watched back some of the episodes and I realize how often I say certain things. I talk about things that happened years and years ago all the time, and it kind of makes me laugh. My kids actually ask me, because I've had these seasons of life that I've kind of lived through, and these seasons of life, I lived in Oklahoma for years. I moved away. I lived in Houston, Texas for about 5 years. So I have a lot of new friends that I made in 1995. Talked about my friend Chad. I've talked about my friend Eric. I've talked about my friend Mackenzie. I've talked about several of my friends. I met them all around 1995 when I moved to Houston. They are still among my closest and most treasured friends. And with all those seasons of life and all those things and all this history, one of the things that kind of struck me is, as I'm talking about business and philosophy and family, I wanted to take an episode and talk about a really simple thing that we've done as a family for all these years that I think it actually carries weight across the board. I watched this show years ago. I don't know what the show is. As a matter of fact, if anybody, when I tell this story and you guys can remember what movie this is from or what book this is from, I would love for somebody to comment it so I can reference this. But it was this story, I think it was a book that I read, that was about pirates. And one of the things that I read in the book that I thought was really interesting was they have this concept of the black marble. And the black marble was their hard note. And you only got one. And it kind of fascinated me because at that point I was a dad of young kids, and we would get in the car. When we get in the car, because we live in the era that we live in, when I was a child, you just turn the radio on. When you turn the radio on or you put a CD in, well, I'm old enough that you didn't put a CD in, you put a tape in, and you would rewind and fast forward and try to find the right song. And maybe you're listening to your mixtape and who knows. But in those days, you just turned the radio on and it just played. You heard the song, but you don't know what song's coming up. You just know what station you listen to. And you would hear commercials and you hear all the things, and you might skip channels around to avoid commercials, but you didn't really get to pick your playlist. Now everybody gets to pick their playlist. Everybody gets to choose, and we get to choose instantly. I want to listen to this artist, this song, and I want to listen to this clip even of this song. So with my young kids, they would get in the car, and I had two sons. They're roughly 3 years apart in age. So they would be sitting in the back seat, and we got music playing, and we would play a song, and one would say, "Not this one." We would skip to the next song, and then the other one would say, "Not this one." We'd skip to the next song, and it went back and forth. So about 70% of the time, they wanted something else. They wanted something other. And it became exhausting for everybody else in the car, because it was like we don't really get to enjoy anything. And there's always feedback, and there's always complaints, and there's always all those things. And there was not any continuity, and there was not any consistency.
and everybody had tons of opinions, but not any real feedback. So when I read that book, I think it was a book about the black marble, I started thinking about that in the context of me on a road trip with my kids. So I told my sons, hey, we're going to start doing this thing called the black marble. And each day when we're on a trip, you get one black marble. You get one hard no. One. It may be, I hate this song. I don't ever want to hear it. I don't want to hear this song right now. You use your black marble, but you only have one. You only have one. Or, hey, there's places to eat up here. I was thinking that we're going to go to X for lunch. And to get them to agree is really difficult. But if they know, hey, I've got one hard no. Hey, I don't want to go there. That's your black marble for today. That is your black marble. And what they would do is they started getting more selective about their criticism. They started getting more selective about their feedback. And if there was a restaurant they didn't want to go to, they would talk about why they didn't want to go to it and make suggestions of where they did want to go. Because if both of them would agree, hey, I don't want to go there, they both agreed, nobody had to throw the black marble. They'd come up with a solution. And I watched this all kind of evolve in real time. And I thought it was really interesting because they realized, and it's this really interesting thing that I saw, not because I planned it, I was just trying to simplify life. I was just trying to not feel swept around by the winds of opinion. And what happened is instead, my son started to see that influence grows when you learn the cost of your own no. They started to realize that it's not just about having an opinion, but it's about being able to communicate it. It's not just about saying something and being loud. It's about being thoughtful with it. Because when they were thoughtful, they didn't have to throw the black marble. When they communicated, they didn't have to throw the black marble. And sometimes they would still have to, but at that point, they knew like the value and they knew what it cost. I've got one. I've got one hard no today. Do I want to spend it on this? It's not worth it. Do I want to spend it on this? Worth it. If I can get a 7-year-old to think that way, why can't I get myself to think that way? And it's this idea of choosing your battles. And it even goes a step farther than this. It also goes into I'm enamored with the idea of like the hierarchy of need. We talk about this. I talked about this recently where I talked about leadership. Leadership is more important than management. Both are important. Neither are useless. But if you have to choose one, choose leadership. Choose it. Because it is the thing that is overarching. It is the thing that affects everything below it. And it is the value that we want to run as, and I'm falling in love with this idea, and you've come along with me on the journey of me falling in love with this idea of the thin red line. When I look at the jobs that I've had over the course of my life, there is a common denominator. There's a thin red line that runs through all of them. They might be in different industries. They might be in different places. They might have different things associated with them, but there are things that are common denominators. That's the thin red line. With my sons, I have a son that's 19. He's a freshman in college at University of Oklahoma. And I had a conversation with him for years because when he was about a sophomore, he came home and he was feeling anxiety because he didn't know what he wanted to do when he grew up. And for those of you that are grown up, you guys realize how silly that anxiety is, because for most of us, I'm still not entirely sure what I want to do when I grow up. I have somewhat of an idea, but I'm still figuring it out. So the thing that I told him was I said, find 5 things that you really enjoy. Just 5 things you really enjoy. It might be movies. It might be conversations. It might be Radiohead. Like find 5 things that you really enjoy. And then out of those 5 things, I want you to look at them and go, are there careers, jobs, things that I could do for a living that let me be involved in those 5 things that I really love? And then I asked for another important layer that I wish somebody had said this to me when I was younger. And then I asked him the next question. I said, now out of those 5 things, which one will take the best care of your family in the future? I think that's a meaningful thought. And it's not a meaningful thought, and it is a meaningful thought because I didn't say that's the need, that's the hierarchy of need. What takes the best care of your family, followed by everything else. What I said is, what do you love? What can you do with it? And how does it take care of your family? If you put them in that order, in the right order, then all of a sudden, I think there's a possibility that we make better decisions. And that flows out of the idea of the black marble. It's like, I'm going to throw the black marble. Black marble is, this is the thing that I don't want to do. This is the thing that I don't want to be a part of my life. These are the things. And we make all of our decisions based on that. And it also helps us to start to see places where we need restraint. Because I just talked about our influence. Shows the value of exerting our influence by using the word no. Now, the second thing that I want you to think about is I want you to think about the value of restraint. And restraint isn't saying no. Restraint is when you keep your mouth shut, which I suck at. Restraint is about the moments that you keep your mouth shut. Restraint is the moment that you say, tell me more. Restraint is when you ask questions to help understand instead of jumping in and trying to give an answer. Because restraint is relational wisdom. Settle on that for a second. Restraint is relational wisdom. So I want you to think about this, and this is the thin red line that runs through those 2 points. Point number 1 is about influence and the cost of your own no. Number 2 is restraint is relational wisdom. And the third thing that we have to look at is we have to look at it as we shape the future by teaching the weight of our words. We shape the future. Who we become. Who we give ourselves to. What we give ourselves to. What we think really matters. The first step in that is the weight of our words. Now let me unpack this. I'm going to unpack it really, really briefly. I'm going to try to be really brief. The weight of our words is like the first. It's the first point. Because what happens whenever we say it? What happens when we use our yes and we use our no, when we use our conversation, when we figure out our priorities, when we have our hierarchy of needs, when we start to define those things, it starts as our words. For those of you that have been listening for a while, I talk about, I want to do work that I'm proud of with people that I respect on projects that I love that might change the world. Those are my 4 things. In the middle of those 4 things, if I can define them, if I can say them, that will actually drive my activities. That will drive my behavior. That will drive the decisions that I make, and that will help to determine the things that I say yes and no to. And it started with the power of my words. So influence is realizing the cost of your own no, and restraint is relational wisdom. And then that third thing, we shape the future by teaching the weight of our words. What I want us to think about, what I want us, the takeaway from today. When we have opinions, we live in a world now that is filled with hyperbole. When I say hyperbole, I'm gonna spell it out in this way. Hyperbole is exaggeration for the sake of proving a point. We live in a world now where somebody is a horrible, terrible, very awful person. They are a monster. They are a beast. They are a criminal. They are like we say these big grand statements. And we say them to try and prove a point, to try and get people convinced to align with us. And we use hyperbole in an attempt to get people to align with us. And really what hyperbole is, and I'm going to say this really clearly. Hyperbole is I'm right, you're an idiot. That's it. I'm right, you're an idiot. That's the point we're trying to make by using that. And the sad thing is we've gotten to a point in our culture and in our world that we have people on this side speaking in hyperbole and people on this side speaking in hyperbole. And when those two people have a conversation, nobody wins because nobody's listening. Because nobody wants to understand. And chances are nobody's willing to change. So how do we change conversations? How do we change expectations? How do we change things at work where we can ask, what if? It's not my way or the highway, it's what if? Have we thought about trying this? And we welcome feedback. We welcome conversations. But our world instead is this, that's awful. That's stupid. We shouldn't do it. But then we don't have a suggestion on what we should do instead. Again, we're living in this hyperbolic overstatement of all of these things. And it's exhausting us. So for me, I'm going back to that idea of the black marble. There are moments where no is no. There are moments we want to use our influence in a very concrete way. But if we attempt to exert our influence constantly, it stops being about influence and it becomes about manipulation. Does that make sense? It stops being about influence and starts being about manipulation. And that's a slippery slope. So the black marble is a reminder to pause long enough to consider what the moment needs, not what our preference demands. I'm going to give you a little thing that was really helpful for me. I don't think I've said this here before. There's a guy when my kids were younger, there was a guy, his name was Bob. He was 15 years older than me, 20 years older than me. He had 3 daughters. They were just great girls. Really great girls. They have a great family, like just great family. And I asked Bob, what's the best parenting advice he had ever been given? And he told me something that I think was really rich. Because as you can tell, just from listening to this podcast, you can probably understand from seeing these videos, I have lots of thoughts. And if I'm not careful, all my thoughts could easily overwhelm my sons. I've watched as there are parents whose personalities are so big that their children don't get to have personalities. And I didn't want to be that dad. I wanted my kids to have their personalities. So I asked Bob, how do I help my kids to find their own way? And he gave me some really genius parenting advice that I've used for the last almost 20 years. He said, if it's about their safety, be unyielding. If it's about their preference, let them choose. And the safety part makes sense. And when they were very small children, a lot more decisions were about their safety. There were a lot more things that I had to pay attention to that were about their safety. As they've gotten older, it's become more and more about their preference. So for my son at 19 now, most of the conversations I have with him are about preference. And there's some of those that in my head, I think, I wish he would just decide to do it my way. It'll be easier for him. And instead of doing it my way, what I have to say is, what do you think? How do you think you should handle it? And the reality is, much to my dismay, there are times that I've thought that I was right and he's been right when it comes to preference. There are times that I've been right and he's been wrong, but it's still preference. It's not the end of the world. It's not leaving scars. It's him learning and figuring out the process of the weight of his decision. It's the black marble. He's learning the value of those choices and the value of those words. And I want to leave you with this one thought as we leave. And I don't know if this is the most meaningful part of it all. But think about this today. I'm going to think about this today. What one moment today actually deserves my hard no? What one moment today deserves my hard no? Because I want my life to be oriented more about yes and more about possibilities. And less about no. Less about fear. Less about danger. And more about what if. And this is where I say it messy before anyone assumes that it was tidy all along. See you next week.